Brilliant. Right, so hello everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this second show and tell for the Supporting Dementia Care project. So big thank you for joining us today. So for anyone that I've not met on the call, my name is Sophie Nelson and I'm Digital Projects Manager at LOTI, and I've been working closely on this project with the Helix Centre, who will introduce themselves in a minute. I think just looking at the participant list, there might be a few new faces on the call, so we'd be really grateful if you could all take the time to introduce yourselves in the chat. So Matt, if we could go to the next slide and I'll run through the agenda. So I'm just going to do a really brief introduction just about the programme that this particular project falls under, and then I'll pass over to the most interesting part of the session. So the Helix Centre will sort of share the progress they've made on the project so far, and also run through how they've co-designed the prototype that they'll be testing next month, and how they've been working with boroughs and community groups to do this. And then after that, there'll be time for questions as well. So if I could just ask if you could all stay on mute for the first part of this session, but please do come off afterwards to ask questions after the Helix Centre presented. If you've got any before then, just add them to the chat. I'll be having a look at that throughout this session. So if we move on to the next slide. So before I hand over to the Helix Centre, I'll just do that quick introduction about our programme. So this project is part of the Digital Inclusion Innovation Programme. So it's a 2-year programme managed by LOTI and funded by the GLA, but we are working with it with working on the programme with a lot of different partners as well. So the programme's main aim is to use innovation methods to design initiatives to tackle digital inclusion across London, which was exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. So one way we're doing this is by providing local authorities and VCS organisations with information and resources to scale out tested interventions. So we hope that the equipment and methods that we test in this Supporting Dementia Care project can be replicated across other areas of public service, and of course in dementia care as well. So we're working really closely with the Helix Centre, as I mentioned, to deliver this project. So I will hand over to them now. I think going over to Matt.
Excuse me. Morning. Hi, I'm Matt Harrison. I'm the senior designer at the Helix Centre, and I'll explain that in a second. And I'm joined on this project by my colleagues Kat, Sophie, and Alice, who are all here today as well. Thank you very much for making time to join this session. It's really excited to share our progress with you. I'll recap. We've done one of these before, so I'll recap how we got the first bit reasonably quickly, but I will start at the beginning just for anyone who's new to the project. The Helix Centre is a design and innovation lab within Imperial College London. So we're based at, we're part of the university, we're employed by the university, we're based at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington. And we, as a centre, we're reasonably small, but we undertake a variety of sort of healthcare innovation and design projects, working with clinicians, patients, members of the public. And as part of that, we also work in the UK Dementia Research Institute, and one of the 2 centres they have at Imperial College London, and that's the Care Research and Technology Institute, which is a reasonably new, it's a couple of years old. It's a research centre based in White City in the Imperial College campus there. And for us, this project has sort of come out of our dementia theme, our dementia work, and our experiences working with people with dementia through the pandemic. All right, click on the right window. So just as a background to this project, we know that people with dementia were some of the worst hit and most isolated during the pandemic. A lot of the rest of us jumped onto Zoom and Teams and started working through widely available technology that actually evolved quite quickly as so many people started using it. But a lot of people with dementia who relied on, or continue to rely on face-to-face social engagement and support from neighbours, professional carers, friends and family, community groups. A lot of that fell apart during the pandemic, putting a lot of pressure also on live-in carers, family carers, partners, husbands, wives, sons, daughters. That isolation has continues to be a challenge for that demographic, and I think the appetite perhaps to use technology has perhaps increased as things like Zoom have become a regular part of our lives now. And the pandemic also, exposed what many people in this meeting will already know, that people living in dementia were always, or have always been, quite an isolated demographic and left behind by technology. Excuse me. As the pandemic has eased, community dementia support has been returning to in-person meetings, and that is generally, a good thing and something to celebrate. And it's great that we can do that again, but there is, of course, something to be lost in losing a digital connection to people in their own homes, for people who continue to struggle to get to in-person meetings and in-person support. And so we still think that this is as relevant as ever. Keen to explore ways of keeping people connected digitally, especially as we move back to hybrid models or in-person meetings. So our aims for this project were to develop digital approaches to tackling isolation, very specifically thinking about social isolation with people with dementia and carers in the community, with the sort of knowledge that if we can work with this group, it might impact others positively as well. We are doing it by co-designing with London boroughs and voluntary community sector people affected by dementia. And a quick overview of the project timeline. We're sort of towards the end of, well, we're into phase 3 now. We had a period of working with local authorities, community organisations to understand the opportunities. We've been through a process which we'll describe today in a bit more detail of co-designing, particularly with memory cafes, people in the community, to test and iterate prototypes. And now we're about to move into a pilot phase where we give an intervention to 12 people in the community to test in their own homes and provide feedback. So we focus through our consultation phase. We decided to focus on getting people, making it accessible as possible for people to participate in online video calling. And Zoom is the most commonly used by community groups out there. So and has various accessibility advantages. So we're focusing really on in the first instance on helping get people onto Zoom calls, people who have not got experience of technology in their home. And the reason to focus on this is manifold, but a video call is as close to sort of real human contact as you can have through the internet, through digital means. Seeing faces and body language can be very valuable to people living with dementia, where perhaps the ability to have a conversation or to communicate verbally is restricted. The importance of seeing the faces that you're familiar with, especially if you're isolating, is very important for people living with dementia to remember who are close to them. Video calling provides access to local group activities and helps you stay engaged with the local initiatives, but it can also provide richer contact with an individual's friends and family, whether they're local or spread around the world. So we developed this focus on making it accessible and intuitive as possible, and our theory is that if we can support that first task to get people online and get them using technology, get them using a tablet computer, it might lead to building confidence with technology for other applications and other uses. So we've gone as well for using a mainstream device rather than sort of assistive technology type devices, in the hope that it's opening up the digital world to people gradually by supporting them to do one thing very well. So We came through sort of workshops with some with people on the call here, for which we're grateful for your input. We started with an idea of creating a digital befriending kit, a sort of a loose concept, and had this idea of trying to make joining a Zoom call as sort of physical as possible, not relying on email addresses, web links, codes, passcodes, and all this sort of thing, breaking down those barriers. We've talked about the way people have devices in their home and how they sometimes get put away in drawers and forgotten and not charged up and things like that. So we thought about how we make it part of someone's living environment and how we get people online. We came up with this sort of loose idea at the beginning of having a printed card, which you can see on the right, that represents a meeting. And that could be made for the individual, and there is a code to scan rather than a link, a web URL to join the meeting. We took this idea in an early form to different, well, first of all to a memory cafe in Westminster, and got people to try it, and it was very revealing. And of course, people struggled with several aspects of it. From everything from reading the instructions to understanding what a code was to knowing which bit of the screen to tap and how hard to tap it. People were doing it in quite a busy environment, but actually we were able to have successful calls with Kat, who was our remote researcher who spoke to people through the Zoom meeting and asked them how they found it and how they were getting on, and it was very interesting. It was people enjoyed it, and although there were sort of a couple of things to overcome, we were encouraged. So we iterated and took it a bit later to another group in Newham, and then we iterated again and took it to another group in Hammersmith and Fulham. And then we've also been talking in a slightly different way, parallel way, with a group in Lewisham who actually tried using Zoom to do poetry sessions online during the pandemic, had some positive and negative experiences, and were interested to see if we could help overcome some of those barriers, which we are planning to do to test in the upcoming trial. So we've had great input from a wide variety of people in community settings. This is close to the sort of current prototype that we're going to take into the test, and there's various bits of it which I'd like to walk you through. There's a purpose-made tap and chat app for iOS and Android that makes that scanning easier and joining the Zoom call. There's a tailor-made cardboard tablet stand and this idea of a Zoom ticket or invite, that's a printed card, that work together to make that scanning easier. We've worked on how to configure tablets to simplify them, make them more intuitive, and build instructions into them. And we've created a website for the creation of the Zoom tickets, so that people can go on and make their own Zoom invites, print them out and give them to the people they want to reach. So the Zoom tickets went through several iterations of form and shape and size of code and clarity of information. The top left is where we started. We started trying to hide the code into a sort of textured wallpaper at the top right, so you could just sort of point the tablet anywhere at the invite and it would work. That sort of worked, but didn't really work. Bottom left, there's an idea that you could just put the tablet computer on top of the bit of paper and lift it up gradually to join the call or to scan the code. That proved okay, but not as good as where we ended up. And then there's this idea of something printed that you could print and fold and put in the stand. So lots of iterations. This is how it's looking at the moment. So you can print it on a regular A4 printer. It doesn't use up too much ink. There's a simple fold down the middle to make it a bit sturdier. It could be printed on a nice bit of card if you were inclined, but it also works on a normal printer with normal A4 paper. This is the app. Now, there are lots of QR codes reading apps out there, and they're free. Most modern devices have them built into the camera function. But what we found is that even the sort of simplest ones are embedded with things that confuse users if they're not familiar with them. It might be adverts, or it might be a very helpful history of what you've scanned. Just things that sort of cluttered the interface and made it harder to use, with potential sort of risks for people getting confused and stuck, and also, collecting data on users of various kinds. And we didn't want any of that, so we made our own app that is really simple. First of all, it means that we can name it what we like. It's not named QR code reader or QR this, that, or the other. It's called, at the moment, Tap and Chat. When you open it, there's no distractions. It helps you focus on what you want to do. There's no history collected. There's no data collected on the user. It verifies that the link that you scanned is a Zoom call, and confirms that, so that you can be confident that you're joining the right thing. And it tells you if it's not a Zoom call. At the moment, it gives you then the option to open it if you still want to, or leave. This could be further encrypted if necessary, so that we know it's the right Zoom call, or it could be changed so that it's flexible to use with Teams, for example. But at the moment, we focused it on it working for Zoom, and it'll only open the right kind of URL. We've been experimenting with configuring and creating assets for tablet computers that make them easier to use, especially at the beginning when you're learning. So creating wallpapers and lock screens that have instructions on, that show you what to do and where the buttons are. A lot of these devices are beautifully sleek, but the buttons are inaccessible. They're hard to see. You don't know where they are. You forget what they do. I mean, even experienced users press the wrong buttons on these things. So we've been experimenting with that and actually going for more, simplifying them as we go. But another thing we do is remove all of the apps off that we're not using off the home screen, so that you can see on the right there on the Android tablet, there's just one app for this one purpose. The other apps are potentially available, by swiping up, and it can of course be changed over time, but we want to get this one thing working well, so let's make it simpler. And with the stand, we started, to make the scanning easier. We wanted to be able to position the card immediately behind the tablet device at the right distance, so that we're not waving. We found people, likely to have tremors. They feel cautious about handling the technology. They're worried about breaking it. They're worried about the cost. They're worried about it not doing what they think it's going to do. So we wanted to locate the tablet somewhere simple and appropriate for the call, and then make it easy to put the invite in the right place so that it joins the Zoom meeting. So a lot of thought in this. This one on the left is the first prototype that went to the Newham workshop, I think, just to test the concept, and then we've carried on making it in cardboard to make it inexpensive, and I think it still feels like a nice bit of something that people can be happy to have in their room. So this is what it looks like at the moment. It's nice and simple to set up, and it folds flat. Literally just sort of prop it up and attach the Velcro bits together, and it's there, it's fixed, and it's ready for you. We might make it more colourful for the pilot, stretch to some colour printing. And then this is the web app for creating the Zoom tickets. And let's see. I'll do a quick demo here. I think, is this working? Are you looking at the website?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we could have a show and tell. You can just type. This is, again, no user accounts, no data collected. Just so I'm thinking on my feet here. You can copy a Zoom link in here, or you copy it from Zoom. Obviously, this is being used by the community organizer or by a family member, not the person living with dementia or carer who's receiving it. if you type in a URL or paste in a URL, you can see that the QR code forms as you type it, and then you can upload a picture, which could be a person that it calls, that the meeting represents, or it could be an activity. So you can just upload a picture and then print it. It's as simple as that. So the invites could be printed and given to somebody or posted to them, or whatever feels most appropriate. And of course, Zoom meetings can be set up to be specific to a particular event and time, or they can be sort of anytime meetings. So it could represent, one ticket could represent a connection to one person, like a son or a daughter or a family member, to be used on an ad hoc basis. How am I doing for time? This is a quick video. There's no audio here. It's just to show the end-to-end process, really, again. So this is copying a Zoom link from a pre-arranged Zoom meeting. I'm doing it with one hand here and filming, so it's a bit clunky. Uploading a picture. Printing the card. Again, testing with one hand the folding. So you click the app, it opens it up, and then you pop the ticket in the back, and immediately it opens a Zoom link. You don't need to be signed into Zoom, which is one of the advantages of Zoom. So there's less, that's an option to have the person signed in, or wouldn't necessarily need to be if it creates opportunity to protect people's data and identity. So I've got to, it's playing again now. How do I move on? So that is the prototype, and what we want to test in our pilot over the next 6 weeks or so. Love to have your thoughts and feedback at the end, but I'm going to hand over to Alice now, who's going to run us through our plans for testing this in the community.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, let's go straight on to the next slide. So yeah, the first thing that we need to do is to kind of recruit some participants to take part in a pilot. And the idea of the pilot is that we can get these kits out into people's homes and sort of test it in that more realistic environment, because the testing that we've done up to now was in a community group meeting setting, where there's kind of lots of things that can change what we find out from that. Like partly that obviously we were there to help people to use the kit, but also obviously it's can be quite a busy environment, which I think affected people's ability to use it a little bit. So yes, we're going to recruit hopefully 12 people with dementia to get the kit, and we'll go out and install it. Not that it takes much installing, but give it to them in their homes. The people that we're going to get involved will be through the community groups that we did the code design sessions with, and the community group organisers will hopefully help us to get in touch with sort of the right people. We're going to, as Matt said at the beginning, we'll be focusing on those homes that have less technology, or might be a little bit more isolated, and to make sure we get kind of the necessary consent, we'll be involving carers in that kind of stage of the process. Next slide. So when people get their kit in their homes, we're going to sort of do two things to test that out with them. So the first thing will be that they'll be invited to a weekly group activity. So basically the community group, but online, and that'll be for an hour. And we're going to run it for 4 weeks, and in each of those sessions we'll do some kind of similar activity to what they might do if they were like attending the group in person. So we could do a reading group, some singing or music, and some online word puzzles, and sort of test out which things work well online and what makes something work better or not, and what people enjoy, of course. Then in addition to that kind of 1 hour group activity, we'll speak to each of the participants on a one-to-one basis each week, to sort of ask in a bit more detail about how they're finding it and how they found the kit and the activity. We think we'll start off doing that on the phone, literally calling them up and asking when a good time to chat is and chatting about that. But we could hopefully evolve that to be also by using the kit on Zoom as the weeks go on. And of course, each week will be each check-in will be a moment to check that the participants are happy to kind of continue taking part and they're enjoying it and there's no like big problems around that. So in terms of like the kind of questions that we're going to ask and the way we'll evaluate the project, we're going to do an evaluation survey, I think, before and after, to ask the more kind of holistic things. So I suppose it's the things that are more the overarching goals of the project. So for example, how often the participants might feel lonely, how satisfied they are with their opportunities to socialise and their opportunities to do kind of leisure and social activities. And we'll kind of be interested to see if that changes at all throughout the use of these new kits. Next slide. Then during the pilot, on these kind of weekly basis check-in calls, we can ask, we'll aim to ask about sort of 3 sections. So their ability to take part in the activity and how satisfied they feel with that. We'll be asking about the usability of the device and the kit. I think that's the bit that we're kind of really interested in. So we want to know if they're successful in sort of logging in and doing the process that Matt just showed in that video, or if there's any kind of stumbling blocks with that we haven't been able to identify in the testing up to now. We're interested in, you know, if they've had help, if they've got access to help, and you know, if they're the person that can help them has been successful to get them into the call as well. And understand just generally how they found using it, if there's any kind of issues or positive points about the cardboard stand and the invite and all the different elements that there are there, where there's sort of a bit of potential for things to go wrong. We want to understand if they've found anything difficult and how they're enjoying it and if they're happy to continue. And then we'll also get some feedback finally about the activity, I suppose, because we're interested in kind of formulating what makes for a good online community group activity, as well as just the physical kit. So we'll want to know if they've enjoyed the session that week and what they enjoyed about it, and for example, if they could hear it well and see the other participants and felt able to contribute. Something that we picked up in the community group testing, that when they were having a call using the kit, actually some of them found it very hard to hear what was going on, but that could be largely due to the rest of the environment of the room, but it's something we should keep an eye on. Yeah, we want to know if there's anything that they didn't enjoy about it, and we can ask them what they would like to do more of in these future groups. And I think we'll be able to be quite flexible and sort of tailor the activity, whether it's reading or singing or something else that comes up. We'll be able to tailor those activities throughout the 4 weeks based on sort of what we start to hear. And then when the pilot's finished, we'll give the participants the option to keep their kit and their tablet, and we'll remove any kind of management system that we've got on it, so that they can kind of be free to use it as they wish, I guess. And we'll be creating this toolkit of our learnings about the process that we've been through, or the findings from the pilot, and about the kit and about the remote activities, so that other people can use that and build on it or replicate it. So yeah, we've come to everything that we wanted to share, and I'm interested to hear everyone's questions. We definitely should have questions, but I also have this question for you. So I'm interested in what you would need to know in order to kind of deploy this at a larger scale. Like what do you really think that we need to find out in this pilot, or what do we need to explore more for this to become a kind of a bigger thing that can be deployed at a larger scale? Have a mull over that and let me know if you've got any response, but otherwise we'll take any other questions that you've got. I can see there's already some in the chat.
Thank you. Shall I stop sharing? Would that be the best option now? I can always bring it back up if anyone wants to see anything again, but how's that? Has that worked?
Yep.
Great. Shall I start by maybe just addressing Matthew Sims had a couple of questions.
Yeah, and Fiona has too.
Sorry?
I was just going to say Fiona's got one in the chat as well.
Great.
Yeah.
How are people reminded that a meeting is due and they can join? I mean, we've gone for the simple option of writing it on the invite card and making that available so that they can magnet that to the fridge, or they can they can use whatever mechanisms they have for reminding them of things in their daily routine. But we'd also, for a community group, we'd probably recommend a phone call half an hour before or so to remind people that they have the option to join in and doing it old school way. One possibility for the future is to build a bit more functionality into the Tap and Chat app, so that it comes up with a prompt or something. But again, we wanted to go for simple to start with, and let people use their own mechanisms for reminding people. We do imagine that sort of as well, family, calls with family or friends or so might start with a quick phone call and then, migrate onto Zoom, or so that you can have that richer connection. And you had a previous question, a consideration about looking at looking at TVs. I think Sophie maybe answered this. We've gone for the simpler option of using a standard iPad in the trial. We've been developing everything for Android and iPads, aware that Androids are a bit cheaper, but for simplicity in the pilot. It's interesting, there were various differences in each, mostly to do with the Zoom app more than anything, more than the hardware. The way the Zoom app operated differently on Apple and Android just threw up a couple of little hurdles, like whether the camera was turned on automatically or whether the audio could be joined automatically. And leaving the Zoom call was slightly easier on one than the other. So just because of time and pressure to do the pilot quite quickly, we've selected iPads for the trial. but we intend to make the tools available for both. But again, I guess getting people using the tablet has the opportunity to then, they can start using it for other things if they build some confidence around it. But I think, integrating with TV could also be interesting for the future. Hi, Matthew. Sorry, so you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering my question. I hope you don't mind me just saying thank you for the question and just following up very, very quickly. I think at Lambeth we are having that thought about televisions is something that we are interested in pursuing, but actually it's quite interesting that it could potentially be on the back of the understanding about how tablets are being used. So I'd be very interested in keeping in contact and seeing if we can support a kind of a phase 4, which might be, and if we need to develop some technology that makes that easier, having discuss things with a number of people are so familiar with their televisions and the way they can hear and the fact they're in the corner and they can sit looking at them, that actually the usage of that might actually be quite dynamic in terms of allowing people to feel comfortable with it. And I appreciate fully that it's not it's not a plug and play like an iPad. Clearly it has given you more opportunity to go quicker. So I'd definitely like to be in contact about whether we can potentially work with you to fund potentially some development of that. And the only other thing that I just want to, while I've just got the stage just before for my second question about reminding people about it, I just know with my own aging parents that they can forget anything if they're and as the question about scaling this up to a bigger, if you've got to phone everybody to remind them that the ukulele club is on in half an hour, that's going to be a bit of a barrier to upscaling in a big way. So we're also thinking about voice activated technology and whether linking it with an Alexa, for example, that can actually tell you that there's so it can connect to some voice activated technology to tell you there's your ukulele club is in half an hour, to remind people, might be again a potential next step that again I'd be happy to talk about how we can look at that.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and we did look a little bit at Facebook portals, things like that. So they have a version that I think works with the telly, but we couldn't get it scanning anything. There's no camera involved, or it's so restricted, the apps available on it. Although they do have Zoom available on the portal. And what else I was going to say, and the TV thing is also interesting, because we found that although people don't have technology or use technology or iPads and computers very much, quite a lot of people do have Wi-Fi, perhaps for the telly. And actually the provision of Wi-Fi, at least in the people we spoke to, wasn't as big a hurdle as we thought. Although in our trial we are offering to provide a router and data SIM, so that hopefully we can get a few participants that really are kind of fresh to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your replies.
Thank you. Fiona, I had a question, so I'm just looking here. You said you're hoping to make use of the device a part of everyday life. How do you plan to do this to avoid the problem putting the device away and forgetting to charge? So it's a really good point. I think the stand was our hope that we might be able to address that. How successful it will be, I think it remains to be seen, but I think it'll be part of of our installation and training, if you like, is as much as possible, find somewhere that you're happy for it to sit and keep it plugged in. We do realise that some of this demographic don't like things being kept plugged in. But I think all we can really do is reassure, and that is one reason why we looked at, we were interested in the portals, Facebook portals, because they have a sort of form factor that makes them look more like a picture frame than a device or a tablet computer, and they don't have a battery, so they really encourage you to keep them plugged in and permanently on display. And so with the stand, we were sort of aiming at trying to sort of make the tablet feel more like that. But how successful will be, I think, is for us to work out in the next few weeks. And there might be future, iterations of the stand that make it more, make it feel more permanent. I'm looking on the fly here, but David says, well thought out approach. A pilot group, in the pilot group, are you categorizing participants into different age brackets to see whether a particular group has better outcomes? Also, are Zoom calls locked down to stop Zoom bombing? Yes, so we're not categorizing our individuals. We're only expecting 12. We've only really got the budget and capacity to support 12 people to have the devices, and it'll have to be a little bit opportunistic as to who is willing to try it, within the time frame. But we'll certainly try and gather a bit of background information to sort of see if there's anything of note. But it's obviously going to be a very small sample. The Zoom calls, yeah, they will be hosted, so we'll have a waiting room set up. There's advice around how to host such meetings as well as possible. So making sure that you're there 10-15 minutes. The meeting starts 10 or 15 minutes before the scheduled time, so that people who turn up early can be welcomed. And we also, we'll make sure that the hosts can end the meeting for everybody to avoid any problems of people not being able to turn off cameras or leave the meeting at the end. We thought in quite a lot of detail about how to do that, and we'll be happy to share that, particularly in the toolkit at the end, about how we sort of structure the Zoom meetings for this group. But to some extent, there's flexibility as well for we're creating a Zoom invite. It will be up for the community organisers to set the right parameters on the Zoom meeting, and again, we'll provide sort of recommended settings. Karen suggested automating calling for the reminding. I think that could work. I don't know much about that. I presume that would just be through a landline. Maybe a service that can be used to call people, say half an hour before an event, to remind them. That sounds like that could be really promising. I think what we've come up with is try to address one thing quite well, but it could fit with a lot of other initiatives or projects. I mean, it could work with managed devices. We'll use managed devices for the trial, but it also works with unmanaged devices just as well, so that people can use it on their own devices if they have one, or it can fit different needs reasonably well. So again, some people might need extra speakers or access, assistive technology aids to help them access the tablet. But again, by going for a sort of off-the-shelf device, hopefully it gives a lot of opportunity to augment that to suit individual users' needs. Any live questions, or anyone want to ask anything? Or should I keep going with the chat?
There's one more in the chat that is there consideration about how this could be used to help people who are isolated, who don't have dementia? And I think we haven't specifically looked at that, but there's definitely potential there, I guess.
We are interested in. I mean, the brief for what we set out, was households was supporting dementia care and dementia carers. So people living with dementia might use it directly, or they might use it with support of someone who lives with them. But carers are often as isolated, or felt the isolation as much as the person with dementia themselves, through the pandemic and such. And even in the workshops that we went to over the last few weeks, we heard of people, carers who were excluded from joining Zoom calls because they didn't have the know-how and the technology. So in a lot of the work that we do in the Dementia Research Centre, we're designing for sort of a household where, you know, there's someone with dementia who could be anywhere from a mild cognitive impairment to quite advanced dementia. And then there's a carer, often a carer, who lives with them, who, you know, might have their own health challenges or their own frailty and their own experience or lack of with technology. And actually, we need to design for them together and with a lot of fluidity about who does which role and what skills they have in the house or on tap through friends and relatives. So I think there is a lot of potential for people. You know, it's a sort of inclusive design principle that if you design with people with some of the more challenging needs or requirements for a service or device, you can include more people in its operation by making it, you know, more accessible and more intuitive to use. So I really hope that this could be more widely applicable for anyone who's, you know, just starting to or nervous about using technology, or just starting to get familiar with you know, tablet computers in particular. There's possibility there. Yeah, is there consideration about how this could be used to help? Oh, that's the same question. Have I missed anything that's been asked? These are great questions, and it's great. It's a really nice point of the project to be getting this feedback as we've got an opportunity to refine it a little, you know, once more before, you know, putting it into people's homes in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So any sort of thoughts on, you know, that come to you over the next couple of days, we're very pleased to hear them. Oh, my phone's going with the miss. Let's get that.
Oh, Peggy's got her hand up. Go to Peggy.
Good morning. It's Peggy Coles, the Hammersmith and Fulham Dementia Action Alliance. One of the advice points that's been given to me is starting an activity with the same piece of music, for example, or ending it with the same piece of music. And I wondered if, as the Zoom, the user initiates something on Zoom, if they're, even as they haven't arrived yet at the ukulele moment, if there could be a kind of recognizable, like, aha, you know, like the BBC, you know, not, maybe it's British Airways or something where it would signal to them, I've arrived, or all will be revealed, and that will also be a cue possibly to end a session.
I like the pips at the beginning of the BBC News.
Yes, I guess.
That's a nice, yeah, it's a nice idea. I think we should think about how we can incorporate that. Yeah, I guess we're planning 2 groups of 6. I think 6 is a great number, a good number to try for an online meeting. It's enough that you can sort of have everyone on screen, and so we'll have two groups. So we'll have roughly 8 sessions, group sessions to try things out. We might want to strike a balance there between trying different things in each one to see what people like, and having a bit of consistency so that it feels familiar. So we'll just have to think about how we make the most of those 8 sessions. I think I like that idea, and again, it could be a way to reinforce. We've got a bit of a brand with the Tap and Chat app, and we could maybe tighten that a little bit with some colour schemes or something to make people feel that to reinforce that they've pushed the right app, that they're in the right session. Give it all a good name and colour scheme to help people feel familiar might work as well. Joe came and left again. Hi, Matthew.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back again like a bad penny. I've just put another comment, another question, because sorry, this is so interesting. I just got to ask the questions while I got there. It's about one of your replies to Peggy as well, or where you're going about content, and how you see, and again answering your question as well, Alice, about what next about bigger rollouts. How do you envisage the content being made? Certainly, as you are widening it out. And apologies, I'm certainly not a dementia expert, but I'd imagine that some repetition would be good, but some new things would be good as well. But also, in the same sort of answer to your question about having small groups is good, in that bigger rollout, how do you then start managing the size of groups as you're getting a bigger rollout? Would you look at having cards to people that only ensure that there's 6 people that join, or how do you manage that content going forward?
Yes, it's great. It's a good question. I mean, so with the invite, with the cards, that can be, you certainly could have different group, you could have different meetings for different groups. So you could have a subgroup, I suppose, of the people that you're working with. I don't really have an answer for how you can cater for lots of people in one session. I don't think that's necessarily possible. I suppose you can move to more of the sort of the webinar format if you can get people online and into a meeting, and it could be more of a sort of a broadcast, and then you can break people. You could do something. You could have a performance, like a musical performance or a reading that is one way, and then afterwards you could divide a room into smaller groups through breakout rooms, and that could all be managed through this facility. But obviously you need to have enough support to manage each subgroup and make sure everyone's looked after. So I guess you do need to plan ahead a little bit, in that if you need to change the settings on the Zoom meeting, you need to give everyone a new card, which could be or is that even true? You can change the settings on the Zoom meeting afterwards. You just need to be aware of what Zoom link you've given people and that's not editable once they've got the card. Otherwise the card needs replacing. So there is some flexibility in it. But I think that's something that we haven't directly addressed in terms of how the meeting scales if it's successful. Okay. So certainly food for thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Right. So anything else that we can? I would love to. Obviously, looking forward to sharing with you what happens. And if there, we think we've got a good lead. Oh, sorry, Joe, you're here. Hi.
Hi, Matthew. Hi. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat, but sorry to ask, but which organisation was it in Hammersmith and Fulham that you visited?
So it was Jessie Ann Duncan. Jessie Ann Duncan.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you.
And we're very hopeful that we can recruit with that group. There were a few people who are very keen. So we're hoping to involve them in the trial.
That's great. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. Lovely. Well, I think we're more or less bang on time to wrap up, aren't we, Sophie? I think.
Yes, I think we are, and we've got maybe time for one more question if anyone's got one. Otherwise, actually, if I pop mine and Kat's details in the chat, so that if anyone's got any follow-up questions, feel free to send them through to us if we've not, if it strikes you after this meeting. I think as well, so obviously as Matt and the team have said, we'll be starting the first of the 2 sort of 6-person pilots next month. So hopefully by June we should have the toolkit ready for you. So as I said, it will be all the learnings, like how we got to this stage, but also share the documentation that we'll be using. So things like the consent forms, anything like that, we can share them, and risk assessment, share them as templates. So if you want to do something similar, you can obviously piggyback off that content as well, and we'll do a final show and tell as well, just to go through how those pilots went and what we've learnt too. But yeah, please do, as Alice said, if there's anything that you need to know so that you can deploy this at a larger scale, if you let us know anytime between now and June, and we can start thinking about that when we put our toolkit together. Yeah, but otherwise, I think that's everything. So big thank you to everyone who's come along today, and thank you to the Helix Centre as well for presenting so well too. And hopefully see you at the next show and tell.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for your time and input.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.